On a blistering August afternoon in 2008, high-moaned Buck Halston, menos a 52-year-old third-generation rancher, vanished without a trace from his remote property, just outside El Paso, Texas. Buck was the kind of man people noticed tall, rugged, always in a dust-covered hat, and respected by everyone from county officials to drifters passing through. He ran Halston Ranch alone ever since his wife passed in '03, and he was known for being meticulous. Every morning started at 5 a.m., and he always radioed into his sister by noon. But on August 13th, that call never came. When a ranch hand came by to drop off supplies that evening, something felt immediately off. Buck's pickup truck sat idling outside the barn, the driver's door still open, country music faintly playing from the radio. Inside the ranch house, the front door was unlocked. A skillet of eggs sat half-cooked on the stove, now burned black. His hat and boots, always by the door, were missing, but his wallet, phone, and keys were still on the counter. There was no sign of struggle, no broken glass, and no note. It was as if he'd simply stood up from breakfast and walked into thin air. The sheriff's department launched a search within hours, combing the vast desert scrubland and dry ravines surrounding the property. Drones, dogs, and helicopters joined the effort, but not even a single footprint was recovered beyond the house. Local volunteers, some who had known Buck since childhood, spent days on horseback, sweeping the terrain. They found nothing, not a shirt button, not a trail. It was as if the desert had swallowed him whole. What disturbed investigators most was the ranch's gate. It was open, wide open. Buck was notoriously careful about it. He even padlocked it at night because of coyotes and trespassers. Yet on the morning of his disappearance, the padlock was still hanging from the post, untouched. Whoever or whatever led Buck away didn't force entry. They didn't break a window or cut a fence. They were either let in, or had always been inside. As the days turned into weeks, people in the nearby town of Van Horn began to whisper. Some claimed Buck had been seen wandering near the old riverbed days before, muttering to himself. Others recalled strange lights flickering on the ridge behind his property. Buck's sister, Denise, told authorities he'd been jumpy lately, convinced someone was watching the ranch. He'd even installed motion cameras, but curiously, the memory cards were all wiped clean. When police retrieved them, something was wrong. Everyone could feel it. But no one had answers. Only a growing sense of dread. 3 weeks after Buck Halston's disappearance, when hope was already fading and the desert winds had begun to erase any trace of him, an eerie development changed the course of the investigation. On a quiet Sunday evening, Buck's sister, Denise, was alone in her home when her phone rang, an unfamiliar number flashing across the screen. At first, she hesitated. Then something told her to answer. When she picked up, there was no voice, no breathing, just a strange, garbled static, like a broken radio signal bleeding into silence. She nearly hung up until she heard it, a faint, metallic clinking, like distant wind chimes in a storm. Shaken, Denise immediately called the sheriff. The call had lasted only 27 seconds. The number had no caller ID, no traceable owner. But it wasn't the number that raised alarm, it was the origin. When investigators pulled the phone records, they discovered something that chilled them to the bone. The call had pinged from a cell tower only a mile from Halston Ranch. What's more, it had used Buck's own phone, the one that had supposedly never left his house and was still logged in and powered off when collected as evidence. Something didn't add up. Either the phone had been switched, or someone had another one just like it. Desperate for answers, law enforcement obtained a warrant and reopened the search grid near the area the signal had come from. They swept the dry arroyos and cactus fields, but the land offered nothing. No footprints, no tire marks, no disturbances. The sand was still. The only thing that changed was the way the townsfolk looked at the ranch, no longer as haunted by grief, but possibly by something much darker. The sheriff quietly ordered a tech team to recheck Buck's home security system, hoping the external hard drives he installed might reveal something overlooked. What they found was even stranger. The footage from the 2 weeks before Buck's disappearance had all been wiped, but not uniformly. Random clips remained mostly uneventful. But on the night of August 9th, at exactly 3:17 a.m., a single frame survived. It showed Buck standing outside near the barn in complete darkness, barefoot, staring into the trees. His face was pale, and in his right hand, he appeared to be holding something, a small object shaped like a bell or charm. The next frame was gone. Denise swore she had never seen that object before, and Buck was never known to leave the house without his boots, let alone in the dead of night. The investigation grew colder, but the strange voicemail continued to haunt Denise. Over the next few weeks, she claimed she kept hearing the same chime-like sound late at night near her porch. Even though no wind was blowing and no chimes were ever hung there, some dismissed it as grief-induced hallucination. Others began to wonder if Buck had somehow tried to reach her or warn her. The static-filled call marked the last concrete lead in the case for years, but it left behind a haunting question no one could answer: who or what was using Buck's phone from inside the desert? As months turned into years, the official search for Buck Halston slowly faded into silence. But for the people living near the edge of the Texas desert, the story never truly went cold. Something about the land around Halston Ranch had changed since Buck disappeared. Like the desert had exhaled and refused to breathe in again. The ranch stood abandoned, its once busy corrals rusting, the main house collecting dust and desert insects. But what truly kept people away wasn't the sadness of the place, it was what they heard and saw when no one else was watching. In the summer of 2009, a former ranch hand named Miguel Torres returned to check on the property. He was hoping to retrieve some of his tools left behind in the barn, but he returned to town an hour later, pale and trembling, telling the bartender at the Broken Spur Saloon that he'd heard voices, a man whispering his name from inside the well, even though the well had been sealed shut for over 20 years. He swore he saw footprints bare adult-sized appearing behind him in the dust, though no one was there when he turned. No one believed him. At first, by 2010, the whispers became more than rumors. A local teenager dared by friends to sneak into the property came running out screaming, claiming a shadow had moved across the porch and followed him for over a mile without making a sound. The same year, livestock from a neighboring farm began turning up dead, their eyes missing, bodies untouched by predators. A veterinarian examined one of the animals and quietly noted the cuts were too clean, almost clinical like surgical incisions. The police said it was probably coyotes, but no coyote leaves a body fully intact and drained of blood. It wasn't long before the stories spread beyond Van Horn. Amateur ghost hunters and desert wanderers began showing up to explore the haunted ranch. Most left disappointed, finding only boarded-up windows and rusted hinges. But one group, who uploaded grainy night vision footage online in 2011, claimed their equipment shut down just after they captured what looked like a figure standing motionless in the field without a face. The footage went viral briefly before being mysteriously taken down. No one in the group was ever interviewed again. One even deleted his social media and left Texas entirely. Through all this, Denise Halston refused to sell the ranch. She believed Buck was still out there somewhere, maybe even alive. She would sometimes drive out to the edge of the property and just sit in her truck for hours, watching, listening. In 2012, she told a local reporter during a brief interview, "This land, it knows something. It holds secrets. The wind doesn't blow the same here anymore. It feels like it's whispering. And I swear, sometimes it calls his name." Most dismissed her as a grieving sister unable to let go. But a few believed her. After all, no one had ever explained what really happened out there. And the desert wasn't done speaking. On a blistering June morning in 2012, nearly 4 years to the day after Buck Halston vanished, a 29-year-old physical therapist named Cody Bennett was training for an ultramarathon through the Texas Badlands. He wasn't local, just passing through Van Horn while visiting extended family. The route he chose for his run took him along an old service trail bordering the edge of Halston Ranch. Now nothing more than wind-scoured scrub and rusting cattle fencing. Cody wasn't thinking about disappearances or local legends, just keeping pace in the rising desert heat. But about 6 miles into his run, something caught his eye just off the path. Half buried in the sand, partially hidden beneath a collapsed tumbleweed and sun-bleached animal bones, was what appeared to be a rusted metal handle bolted to a flat steel plate. Intrigued, Cody slowed and stepped off the trail. With a few kicks, he cleared away more of the dust and realized it wasn't just scrap metal. It was a hatch square, weathered, and sealed shut with a circular twist lock at its center. What made it even stranger was its location, just beyond the perimeter of Halston Ranch, in an area no official map showed any structure or bunker ever existing. Cody, unsure if it was some kind of military installation or old storm shelter, took a photo and marked the coordinates. He didn't attempt to open it. He was alone, unarmed, and had no idea what might be inside. But something about the air around the hatch unsettled him. It was completely still. No wind, No noise, not even the buzz of desert flies. It felt like the earth was holding its breath, he later told deputies. After returning to town, he shared the photo with the local sheriff's office, who immediately recognized the location and how close it was to the Halston disappearance. Within 24 hours, they had a team on site. The hatch was stubborn, rusted shut and sealed tight, likely untouched for decades until now. After several hours of careful work, a technician finally cracked the locking mechanism. As the hatch creaked open, a powerful wave of stale, metallic air burst upward. It was dark inside. An old spiral staircase descended into a pit of blackness. Flashlights flickered against walls lined with corrugated steel and reinforced concrete. This wasn't a simple storm shelter. It looked military-grade, intentional, reinforced, and hidden. And at the bottom, investigators found something they never expected: a sealed chamber, locked from the outside, and lined with soundproofing foam. Inside the chamber was a narrow cot, a dusty lantern, empty food cans stacked in the corner, and, worst of all, a box of Polaroids, carefully arranged in rows across the far wall. Each photo showed the same man, Buck Halston, his appearance aged and altered over time. In early shots, he looked confused, then terrified, then broken. The most recent photo, marked in ink with the date March 18, 2012, showed him holding up a piece of paper with something scrawled on it. The ink had bled from humidity, but 2 words were still legible: "Still here." And that was when everything shifted from a missing person case to something much more disturbing. The chamber beneath the hatch was unlike anything the investigators had ever seen in a case like this. It wasn't just the eerie silence or the stale, metallic air. It was the overwhelming feeling that someone, or something, had gone to extreme lengths to keep this place hidden. The room was roughly 10 by 12 feet. The walls were covered in a thick layer of soundproofing foam, some of it peeling, revealing cold, gray cement beneath. A single light bulb hung from a frayed cord in the center of the ceiling, swaying ever so slightly, though there was no breeze. On the floor, a thin mattress sat atop a wooden cot, its sheets still imprinted with the shape of a human body. Scattered around the cot were empty cans, water jugs, and what appeared to be handwritten pages torn from a composition notebook, were smeared and unreadable, as though someone had written them in the dark, or while shaking. On one of the walls, Polaroid photos had been meticulously arranged in a tight grid. They were all of Buck, dozens of them. Some dated back to late 2008, showing him bearded, thinner than usual, his face pressed up close to the lens in confusion. But as the dates progressed, 2009, 2010, 2011, his expression shifted from bewildered to outright terror. In several, his mouth was open as if screaming. In others, he was huddled in the corner of the room, eyes fixed on something just outside the frame. Even more disturbing were the details in the photos' backgrounds. Buck was always alone, yet shadows didn't always match his position. In a few images, part of another figure, just a sleeve, a hat brim, or a blurred face was visible near the edge, as if someone had been standing just out of full view. The lighting in many pictures was inconsistent, some seemingly lit with only candlelight, others in complete darkness with flash photography. Most disturbing of all was the final photo, dated March 18, 2012. Just 3 months before the hatch was discovered. Buck looked gaunt, sunken-eyed, his hand outstretched toward the camera, holding a wrinkled scrap of paper with 2 haunting words: "Still here." The forensic team also discovered a locked drawer beneath the cot. Inside were several undeveloped Polaroid film cartridges and an old tape recorder, its batteries long dead. They sent both off for analysis. Meanwhile, the room was scanned for fingerprints, but strangely, only Buck's prints were found, no one else's. Not even on the camera or the food containers. It was as if he had been kept there, but alone. Yet clearly someone had been taking the photos. A psychological profiler brought in by the state quietly described the setup as something between a holding cell and an experimental chamber. Someone had been observing Buck carefully, deliberately, and over an extended period of time. Outside the chamber, a hidden sliding door was found behind a crumbling wall panel. When investigators opened it, they found a narrow tunnel stretching deep underground, too narrow for modern equipment to easily enter. The air that came out of it was colder, denser, and carried a faint, acrid smell like rotting copper and ash. No one had any idea where it led or how far it went, but one thing was clear: Buck's captivity hadn't been random. It had been planned, and beneath the sands of the Texas desert, Someone had built more than a hiding place. They had built a prison. The narrow passage discovered behind the chamber wall wasn't visible at first glance. Tucked behind a sliding panel, cleverly disguised to blend with the cement, it had no handle, only a faint seam. When investigators pried it open, a stale, metallic wind spilled out a strange draft that felt unnatural given the dry, still heat. Above, flashlights revealed a crude tunnel, carved roughly into the rock, with wooden supports that looked decades old, maybe older. The path sloped downward at a slow, steady angle, disappearing into total darkness. From the entrance, the air smelled of rust, ash, and something else they couldn't quite place. Not rot exactly, but the memory of decay. A forensic specialist noted something odd. The construction didn't match any modern standards. The tunnel wasn't reinforced with concrete or rebar, it was carved by hand. Pick marks still lined the walls, and fragments of old tools lay rusting near the entrance. Yet deeper in, a more recent touch was evident. Electric wiring, thin and crude, was stapled to the tunnel wall, leading to a broken light fixture dangling above. Whoever built this place had expanded it later. The theory developed quickly. The hatch chamber may have been constructed post-2000, but the tunnel itself had been there long before Buck vanished. Roughly 40 feet down, the team hit an obstacle. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, its ceiling collapsing inward from what appeared to be seismic stress or an intentional cave-in. On one side, half buried under debris, investigators spotted something that stopped them. Cold, a human skeleton, chained at the wrist to a rusted pipe. The bones had been there long enough to fully desiccate. Tattered scraps of clothing still clung to parts of it, and nearby was a rust-covered canteen and what looked like an old oil lantern. A wallet, preserved under the body, identified the remains as Thomas Weller, a prospector who had vanished. In 1936, while surveying mineral lines in West Texas, the discovery sent shockwaves through the sheriff's department. 2 disappearances, decades apart. One man lost in the 1930s. Another in 2008, both ending up underground on the same cursed stretch of desert. This couldn't be coincidence. Someone had been using these tunnels long before Buck Halston ever inherited the land. And yet, none of the Halston family ever mentioned this part of the ranch. Was it deliberately hidden, or had it been forgotten, buried by time until it reclaimed someone new? Near the collapsed wall, an investigator uncovered a second box, half crushed beneath a slab of stone. Inside were items wrapped in wax paper, old coins, a child's shoe, and a series of newer Polaroid photographs. Protected from the elements, these weren't of Buck, but of others' blurry faces, unfamiliar eyes peering up in fear or confusion. Some appeared recent, others were faded, nearly too white. None of the people in the photographs had ever been identified. No missing persons, reports, matched them. But one thing was disturbingly clear. Buck Halston wasn't the first to be kept down there, and he might not have been the last. As the investigation descended deeper into the tunnel, mystery. Forensic teams began developing the remaining film cartridges recovered from the chamber. Most contained more disturbing photos of Buck Halston, some blurred by movement, some off-angle, as if taken in haste. But a few were entirely different. One in particular stood out. It showed Buck in a corner of the soundproof chamber, but he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was a tall figure in a long coat and a wide-brimmed hat. The man's face was completely obscured, either blurred by motion or hidden in shadow. No facial features could be made out. But Buck's expression told the story. His eyes were wide, locked on the lens, and his mouth was slightly open. Not screaming, just resigned. The FBI brought in digital analysts to enhance the photo. After hours of fine-tuning contrast and exposure, the figure's outline became more defined. The hat's brim was unusually wide, casting an unnatural shadow across the face, unnatural even given the lighting in the room. But there was something else. Upon closer inspection, the figure didn't appear to be standing beside Buck. It was leaning, almost suspended behind him. There were no legs visible below the knee. No shadow where there should have been one. Experts called it a glitch, a trick of the flash. But locals had another name for it. They called him the Watcher of the Sands. For generations, whispers of a desert phantom had persisted in West Texas folklore. Stories told of travelers who wandered too far from the trail, only to return days later changed, silent, and hollow-eyed. In every version of the tale, there was mention of a tall, silent man in a hat who appeared at night in the heat shimmer, just beyond the campfire's edge. Children were warned not to follow voices in the desert. If the wind calls your name, one old rancher once said, you keep walking. Don't you ever turn around. It had always been dismissed as superstition. Until the photo. Because legends don't usually show up on film. But this wasn't the only anomaly. During a review of the underground chamber, an agent discovered something previously missed. Etched into the steel wall behind the Polaroids was a faint carving. It read simply, "He waits below, always below." Beneath the words, crudely scratched, was a symbolon I crossed out by a jagged line. The same symbol was found again, on the wall near the collapsed skeleton of Thomas Weller. This linking detail couldn't be ignored. It suggested a long, shared history between the victims. Different decades, same captor. Or was it something less human altogether? Even more unnerving. Denise Halston, the sister who had never given up hope, revealed something she had kept secret for years. About 6 months before Buck vanished, he had started sketching strange symbols in the margins of his journal. He spoke less, slept even less. One night, he had told her that there was something under the land, listening. She thought he was having a breakdown, but now, with all they had uncovered, the tunnel, the chamber, the photos, the figure, she wasn't so sure. The question remained, had Buck stumbled into something ancient and malicious? Or had it found him long before he disappeared? The official case file on Buck Halston remains open, marked unresolved with unexplained circumstances. The underground chamber was sealed. The tunnel collapse was never cleared. No new leads have emerged since 2012. But locals say strange lights still flicker beyond the ridge on hot summer nights. And some claim you can hear faint knocking beneath the desert floor if you listen hard enough. Denise Halston moved away shortly after the discovery, but before she left, she returned to the ranch one final time. She placed a wooden cross by the hatch and left behind a note that simply read, "I know you're still here." To this day, no one knows who or what held Buck captive for 4 years. Or how many others came before him, and yet, one thing is certain, the desert doesn't forget, it buries, it hides, and sometimes, it watches.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.